with regard to the Zonkaku project, this is something that we've proposed here at Musashino University, and I hope it will get off the ground. I will start work on it soon. And one of the members of our project is Reverend Dr. Jerome Decor, who is a Shin Buddhist minister based in Switzerland, who is also a scholar. He's based in Geneva, I believe, and he has already translated the life of Zonkaku, the official biography of Zonkaku Shonin, into French. And so he's a part of our project as a kind of advisor. And then here at Musashino University, a researcher affiliated with the university, Reverend Ryoe Nanjo, who I think also has spent some time at IBS at one point. He is also part of this project. And yeah, we would like to make easily accessible translations of Zonkaku's works that can be accessed on the internet, similar to there's a website called Shinran's Works, or shinranworks.com, where things can be accessed freely. But also you could purchase the collected works of Shinran in print. And so we want that's our end goal, is we want to have something that people can access freely, but also with a Creative Commons license, so people can quote it and reuse it in any way they like without worrying about copyright infringement. And then also if they want a hard copy, we'd like to also publish his works in a hard copy. And the reason why Zonkaku is important, and I think what drew me to him in the first place, is that he has the first major and still perhaps the most important commentary on Shinran Shonin's Kyōgyō Shinsho, which is considered Shinran Shonin's definitive exploration and explanation of his understanding of Pure Land Buddhism. And there are a lot of passages in there which are difficult to understand. There are many terms that he uses which have been interpreted in the Shin tradition in certain ways over time. And Zonkaku Shonin is really one of the jumping off points for understanding how the Honganji tradition over time has interpreted the words of Shinran. And so we'd like to do a translation of that into English to make a resource like that accessible for the general public, because at the moment we have a very lightly annotated full translation of the Kyōgyō Shinsho, but to have a full annotated translation where almost every word is defined according to, well, Zonkaku often uses, old Chinese dictionaries from, medieval Chinese, which won't be that relevant for a lot of people, but he also refers to other sutras and also Confucian ideas, and tries to explain how he understands what Shinran is doing based on his very learned understanding at the time. And then other works which are really interesting that Zonkaku worked on, which I think are of relevance and will be of interest to people today, are a lot of works that deal with discourse with other traditions. So he has some treatments of conversations he had, or kind of distillations of conversations he had with Nichiren adherents, and also his take on the Lotus Sutra and how it relates to Jodo Shinshu. A question that people who practice Jodo Shinshu often ask is, well, the Lotus Sutra seems to be very important, but Shinran Shonin only mentions it a few times. What's the place of it in Jodo Shinshu? So that will start to help us to have something to point people to. And he has a lot of things, a lot of works, as do later thinkers like Renyo, on questions like what is the place of women in Jodo Shinshu, and how is their liberation assured, and yeah, lots of different topics. But Zonkaku Shonin has a very interesting place in the history of Jodo Shinshu, because he was the son of the Monshu, and the Monshu were originally the caretakers of the mausoleum of Shinran Shonin, which started with his daughter. But the tradition of the Manchu was was eventually carried on down the male line from Shinran Shonen, and then eventually split into various different directions as the sects divided. But so Zonkaku Shonen was the son of the Manchu about a century after Shinran, and he may have had the opportunity at one point to become the Manchu, but he was deprived of this opportunity by his father, Kakunyo Shonen, who is also a very important figure whose works we also have to translate. But the reasons for that are very complicated, and that's also something that a full treatment will hopefully explain. Um, but yeah, Jerome Decor Sensei is really the current Western expert on Zonkaku Shonen. So yeah, but
Wow.
there's a lot in there. So it's going to be a big project which will take many years. Yeah,
Certainly, certainly. Well, how wonderful that you're doing it though, and that you're also not just doing it, but you're making it available in this kind of free use kind of openness for people online digitally, and to have it be available in it sounds like English. You have a colleague that has done a lot of it already in French, but you're going to have it
yeah.
available in English, and it does sound, I mean, like I'm not too familiar with Zonkaku Shonen, and but just hearing just the little bits that you've already shared just now, it does seem like there is a very important role that he held in Jodo Shinshu, and like in the organization of how it all maybe echoes and continues to operate today. And I was just wondering,
Yeah.
like, does his work currently within English speak or within Japanese speaking cultures, is Zonkaku regarded, and are the works that he has written like circulated a lot within Japanese culture or Japanese speaking culture, like how kind of honoring that fundamental role that he had, or is Zonkaku kind of like a an currently unsung figure?
I think in terms of people who study Zonkaku's works these days, it's mainly ministers who are engaging in further study. And as I understood, I spoke to some ministers in both Higashi and Nishi Honganji traditions about this. And in both traditions, when one does further study regarding Shin doctrine, a study of Zonkaku's commentary on the Kyokyo Shinsho is quite common. It seems to be quite established that this is the definitive commentary that you start with. So it's very hard. I wonder how it's read. So that's actually something that I would like to get into as well, maybe for some introductory matter for that volume. It would be a whole volume, that one commentary. Yeah. Uh, but then in terms of his other works, yeah, they don't seem to be very well well known or referred to often. And I think part of that is because many of them served a historical purpose. So I mentioned the dialogues with Nichiren followers, and since the Edo era, there was kind of a there was definitely a lull in discourse and debate between sects, and that was enforced by the government to avoid the kind of conflict between sects that occurred in the medieval Japanese period with warrior monks and so forth. But I think these days, with the ease of accessibility for a lot of sutras, particularly in English, and the popularity of the Lotus Sutra, some of his works, like those discourses he had with Nichiren followers and discussing the Lotus Sutra, I think those would be quite interesting to people these days. But we really won't know what the reception will be until until they're done.
Yeah. Well, I think it's wonderful that you are undertaking this, and that you are being so generous and sharing what will be years of work. And it's great to know that you also have colleagues that are supporting you in this effort. And so thank you for doing it. And when there are a lot of different topics and subjects within Buddhist history and Neoplatonism. I hope I say that okay. Is that right? Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And in a variety of academic subjects and topics that you have a hand in and an expertise in, and we'll get into some of that in a minute. But with your work on figures like Zonkaku and what you had shared about your Jodo Shinshu perspective, like as someone that is a part of that Sangha or that orients their themselves within the philosophy and the uh, I'm trying not to say practice because I know that sometimes people
Yeah,
don't
we
don't,
could
don't
say worldview maybe.
worldview, yeah, worldview of
Yeah.
Jodo Shinshu. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
That's perfect. So that within the Jodo Shinshu worldview that you have, I was wondering when you get up close within text with some of these figures, does has have you felt inspired in any particular way? Has it opened you up? Have you gained any personal insights that have been helpful for your practice, for your worldview?
Yeah. Well, uh, yeah, it's an interesting topic. What is practice in Jodo Shinshu? And I have practiced various things in the past. Um, but yeah, that's a further topic, I suppose. But yeah, definitely when working on materials, when translating or studying the texts of a figure, be it a figure within Jodo Shinshu, or if it's just a Mahāyāna Sutra or the works of past masters, it's always I always see it as a way of just trying to get to know them. And I don't consider myself, you mentioned expert. I don't consider myself an expert in any of these topics. I'm just kind of down. I'm just kind of dipping my feet in loads of different topics and not really there are some people who they spend their whole lives studying one figure. And I admire that because it it would be very nice to be able to have that kind of focus. But I just have trouble focusing on one. So I guess I'll always be a bit of a just a dabbler in various things, including Neoplatonism, as you mentioned. But yeah, I so particularly translation, and this is something I've been thinking about recently. Translation I see as well. All translation is interpretation. It's it's inherently interpretative, and well, one of the things that we often like to rail against in Buddhism is inherent existence or svabhava. And there is this idea in translation theory of untranslatables, the idea that there's a certain essence within a word which can't be transferred into another language. And I think that 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 perspective is not tenable from a Buddhist point of view. All words are relative. They're all present within a larger structure of a larger network of relationships between ideas. And so inherently, every time you're translating, it's going to be an interpretation, it's going to be transformative, it's going to be changing. And so what I do when I read a text, let's say it's in Chinese or in Japanese or Sanskrit, I try to come to an understanding, well, what is this person saying here? And then try to convey my interpretation of what they read in my translation or my explanation or study. But it's just going to be one interpretation, and there can be an infinite number of interpretations for any of these texts. Now, in regards to being inspired, yes, sometimes I'm inspired, sometimes I'm not inspired. So for example, definitely when reading, and this is probably why I ended up focusing on Jodo Shinshu in my personal life. In my academic life, I'm very very spread out. But personally, when I read something like the works of Shinran Shonin, Sonkaku or Renyo Shonin, I definitely feel inspired by what they say because it connects to everybody. Their words assure everybody that they are able to be liberated just as they are, and that Amida's light and compassion embraces all beings. So it's like the light of it's as if the light of the sun were to be able to shine on everything without casting any shadow. Everything is illuminated. It's just, and that's the nature of the Dharmakaya in Mahāyāna Buddhism. And so I see Jodo Shinshu as essentially just an expression of Mahāyāna Buddhism, which personally I find inspiring, but people are drawn to different traditions because they have different causes and conditions in their own background. So there are 84,000 Dharma doors, right? So some people will read the same passage that inspires me, and they'll just think, oh, that's nonsense. And that's fine. That's because I read a passage that might inspire them and think that's nonsense as well. And then in terms of things that don't inspire me, yeah, I mean, I try to read broadly, and I'm very interested in texts that no one has touched. And sometimes we come across passages in sutras that express views that are not uh, that are not they're not acceptable today. So there are texts that have things that we wouldn't like to or we would disagree with regards to women, for example. I mean, I'm sure we've all heard it. People who've read Buddhist texts widely have heard these. And I view all of that as inessential and relative, um, and geared towards celibate monks who are trying to overcome their passions and not definitive statements. But yeah, there are certain things that don't inspire me when I read a text, and uh, but yeah, for the most part, I'm inspired. And most Mahayana sutras, I also feel this kind of inspiration, um, especially yeah, one which really changed my worldview, which was the first one that I published under my Dharma name Shakushingan, was the Secrets of the Tathagata Guhya, and this was a sutra that I had never heard of until a couple of years before I ended up translating it, and this one just changed my, similar to, I'm sure you've had this experience as well. If the first time you read the Lotus Sutra, most people say, I read the Lotus Sutra and it changed my understanding of Mahayana Buddhism. Everything made sense because of this framework of skillful means and the one vehicle. Well, it was the same for me, reading the Lotus Sutra, of course, but also reading the Secrets of the Tathagata Guhya, because it kind of explains things which I didn't have. These questions didn't arise for me, but it explained things. It kind of pointed out, like, yeah, by the way, the Buddha is always manifesting, in ways which are suited to your temperament, but you might not notice it. So the Buddha is always trying to enlighten beings, and so one of the nice metaphors that you just to use an example, not to make the answer too long, but just to give an example of something which I found very inspiring in Mahayana Sutra and the Secrets of the Tathagata Sutra was how do we characterize the speech of the Tathagata, the speech of the Buddha, the secret of the Buddha's speech? Well, it's infinite, right? And the Buddha's speech is infinite, and ultimately it's ineffable. There's a great passage which is also quoted in some shastras. From the night of his awakening until the moment that he entered into parinirvana, the Buddha never uttered a single word. And yet we have all of these sutras, right? So how do we explain that? So the secret, and the sutras framed around the three secrets: the secret of the body, secret of the speech, and secret of the mind. The secret of the speech is that what actually happens is very akin to if we were to imagine floating instruments in the sky, right? And the instruments are floating in the sky, and then they suddenly are wafted by the wind, and they sound forth beautiful, melodious music. This is a metaphor for the the speech of the Buddha. The instruments are the speech of the Buddha, which by itself doesn't utter anything, doesn't utter forth anything. But when it's wafted by the karmic winds of sentient beings' own inclinations, it plays the music that's just perfectly suited for their karmic inclinations. And so everyone hears the Dharma that's right for them at the time. And so this was something which really inspired me. And this is something which you can use to interpret the world. I think it can change your worldview, this sutra, but it's still not very still not very well known. But I hope to continue promoting it in some way.
Yeah, well, so you worked on a translation of this. I mean, is this available like through your website or like the
Yeah,
Okay, great. So just to direct people because now I'm inspired to pick it up
Sure.
myself. So it's your website is alexanderjoneil.com. That's Alexander J and then Oneill.com. And I have more to say about
Yeah.
what else is
But
listed there.
actually,
Good.
sorry, let me add that actually this one is on Shingan's portal.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
Shingen Spot.
do you have the URL for that one there?
No, I don't. I don't.
Oh, sorry. So I think it's Shingan. Sorry, let me just double check.
No, no problem.
Um,
I can also put
um,
it in the description later
sure.
too. Um,
Yeah, it's just shingansportal.com. SHINGANSPORTAL.com.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. We'll put both of those in there. That's wonderful.
thank you.
And is that like a downloadable PDF kind of thing, or is it like a purchase the book sort of thing?
That one's a PDF. Yeah,
Got it. Okay. Well,
yeah, you can download it.
thank you for doing that work and for sharing again so generously your work in this field, but also too, sharing what inspired you because I'm not too familiar with that sutra and the way that you were describing it is very moving. And I was wondering what specifically, I think I understand what might have been moving for you and inspired you, but is it like the access or like just the magnitude and the degree to which the power of the Buddha can reach others like that in its own right is very inspiring where you just feel like you can be reached, is that possible? Or it's like that there is space for you because after all
Hmm,
these instruments land in your ears after all
right.
your causes and conditions you are met how you are like through those
Yeah,
sounds. I was just wondering what about it felt like particularly moving for you.
both. And this also connects, I think, to Sudana's story in the Avatamsaka, in the Gandavyuha Sutra, which is a quest of a youth, Sudana. And he is sent on a quest by was it Manjushri who sends him on the quest? I should probably know that, but yeah, it was either Manjushri or Maitreya who sends him on this quest at the beginning of the final chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra. And he goes to all of these teachers, and some of them are people who you wouldn't expect would be bodhisattvas. All these teachers are bodhisattvas who teach him something profound that leads him to eventually encounter Samantabhadra. And Samantabhadra reveals or even before then, he sees the Tower of Vairochana, in which all Buddha lands are refracted in all directions, and he eventually meets Samantabhadra, which concludes the his verse is very famous, the Bhadra Chari, um, and this is similar in that the people we encounter in the world, we might not know whether they're bodhisattvas trying to train us with skillful means. So some of these people, they're courtesans, right? There are some people who are from also they're doing very mundane kinds of tasks in the world, professions that we'd consider very commonplace. So let's say a carpenter. You wouldn't think, oh, the carpenter is the is a bodhisattva teacher, right? That's not something which would normally come to mind. But this is something that the Gandhabhika teaches. And so in a similar way, what the Tathagata Guhya is doing is taking it beyond people, and we never really know who we encounter is going to lead us towards awakening or give us a nudge in the right direction, whether they really are a bodhisattva or not. If we interpret it that way, that helps us. So that's a skillful means. But what the Tathagata Guhya does, or the secrets of the Tathagata, that's the sorry, I keep switching between the Sanskrit and English names, but the secrets of the Tathagata Sutra does is it expands that from persons to all phenomena. So really, everything the Buddhists can manifest as everything and anything, any sound that we hear, any phenomena that we encounter can be a manifestation of the Buddha leading us to awakening. And this is something that rings true in the Shin tradition as well. Um, and I listened to your talks with Reverend with Enrique Galvan Alvarez, and he was also talking about walks in nature. and this is something that Shinran Shonin also mentions, is the um, the manner um, in which and Dogen also mentions this, that Buddha nature manifests in the inanimate world as well. Rocks, trees, uh, rivers, and animals, and 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 they can give us opportunities to reflect also on our interdependence. And so, yeah, I think how people take these teachings probably differs, based on their own history and their own experiences and their own conditions. But I think that if you read these sutras just in general, if we stop and read Mahayana sutras deeply, by which I mean we stop and try to really think, how does this relate to me as an individual in my day-to-day life, then we can really find a lot of meaning. Because if we just read through them very quickly as if they were novels that we have to finish, then and I've done that as well, and I never get any. I sometimes get something out of it, but I shouldn't say I never get it. I usually don't get much out of it. But if I stop and really try to study each chapter one by one, what is this saying? What is this one chapter saying, and how does it relate to me? Then yeah, there's a lot that we can get out of them. Um, so maybe that sutra won't speak to everyone, but I think my belief is if you do stop and try to study each sutra, um, regardless of which tradition it's from, you'll find something that speaks to you.
Certainly. And thank you for offering that. While you were saying that about the approach towards the reading, where as opposed to a novel, really spending time with it and using it as a reflective tool, where you can see like, well, how does this apply to me? And think of yourself within this, because then I think you're, not that I know, but I feel like, especially when you're dealing with this enormous, infinite, powerful, uh, highly accessible, crafted just for you kind of text, or kind of teachings that are coming through, maybe you weave into that enormity, and because you're using it as a tool for yourself. So there can be something very expansive and vast by doing that. And just on my personal front, like this year, I think actually into the end of last year, I started picking up the Bodhicharyavatara, and the Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. And this is a book that I've read a few different times, sometimes for class, sometimes just for me. And what I've started to do is just read a page of it a night. And that way it's limited. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. And I'll move on to the next one. But sometimes, it'll be like, oh yeah, like, especially like right now I'm in the dedication chapter, and it's just very like, it just reading it makes me feel generous, even if I'm not, it just makes me feel something, especially in like, well, maybe I can, by reading this, and think about making offerings to others, just even for a second, it makes me feel a little bit better, or makes me feel like a little bit more connected to something bigger. So I appreciate that approach. And but at the same time too, I mean, like there's nothing like, closing a book after you just
Oh
smashed
yeah.
it, and you're feeling like you accomplished something. But yeah, there's something about tempering that a little bit that can also be helpful. And then I do want to
Can
get
I?
in. Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, I just wanted to add one thing about Bodhicharyavatara. He expresses the same sentiment. In fact, he might quote he he may quote the Tathagata Gyuhyas at some point in Bodhicharyavatara. I can't quite remember, but for example, this is something which I found very inspiring in the Bodhicharyavatara in the patience chapter. If you encounter someone who acts cruelly to you, you can reframe your relationship to that person by seeing them as a teacher, visualizing them on top of your head as your teacher, as a Buddha, instructing you in patience. And so this is expressing the same thing. Whether that person knows that they are manifesting, the Buddha's activity or not, we can interpret it that way, and that can actually help us. If we interpret everything, if we reframe everything through the lens of the Dharma, then that that can make our practice really and sorry, I'm using the word practice, in the real sense in the terms of bodhisattva practice, that can make the practice progress much faster.
Certainly, and it's also just a for your own sake. I mean, it's just a helpful way of dealing with a troublesome person or like a troublesome situation where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't really want to be here. It's like, well, maybe this is an opportunity to think about why, or maybe this is an opportunity for you to learn about endurance. Easier said than done. I mean, that's a tough task
Yeah.
depending on the situation, but it is encouraging though, like just so my engagement with it kind of can offer some more opportunities for me to be like, oh yeah, like that, I can try to weave that into my day. And I wanted to kind of get into your work with the living text and puja, like text pujas and things like that, because I know you do a lot of work with that, and it's really interesting, especially just with what we're talking about. But I just wanted to, before we go into that, I just wanted to ask, just like, if you're open to it, just going into what you explored before you found Jodo Shinshu as a worldview that you connected with the most.
Yeah, sure. Well, I first got interested in Buddhism as a teenager, or even right at the end of, I was maybe 11 or 12 when I first got interested because I was exposed to it in film and television. There's occasionally references. Even there was a movie at the time, The Bulletproof Monk. I think it was with Jet Li, and I thought, huh, that sounds a little bit. I thought monks are supposed to dedicate their lives to peace, right? And so that actually, that was a skillful means, right? You could interpret that. That's a manifestation of, from the Tathagata, saying, by the way, here's something that might spark your interest. And so then I looked into it on the internet, and eventually told my father and mother, "Oh, I'm interested in Buddhism," and they were my parents are not they're not religious. They're not they're not anti-religious. They were open-minded, and my father my father worked down the road from a Chinese Taiwanese Chan temple in the Linji tradition, the Foguangshan temple. And he said, "Well, I there's a temple near my workplace. Would you like to go and have a look?" And I went with him, and he thought it would just be a phase, but he saw that, my my interest was sparked, and he probably realized, oh, I'm not sure if I'll be able to get him back from this. And so yeah, I ended up going there for about a decade. That was when I was 14. I started going there, maybe a bit over. I was going for a bit over a decade, and and there, yeah, we were practicing Chan, very similar to Zen in the Rinzai tradition, but mainly mindfulness meditation, mindfulness of breathing, and there was also an introduction to Buddhism, which would introduce the foundations of Buddhism as well as the foundations of Mahāyāna Buddhism. And I was involved in various other groups at that temple. Went to Taiwan several times, which is where I started with studying Chinese, and helped with some translation projects that they were engaging in there. And as I was there, while I was there, I was also interested in other traditions. So I explored a bit of Theravada. And I grew up in the Toronto area, and in the Toronto, I was born in England, but grew up in the Toronto area. And there's really a supermarket variety of Buddhism. I'm sure in California it's very similar. You can pretty much choose any tradition you like, and it's there. And so yeah, I shopped around a lot, but I ended up sticking with this Chan tradition for a long time. Practiced a little bit of Tibetan Buddhism as well. Have great respect for Tibetan traditions, mainly the Kagyu tradition, Trangyu Rinpoche's lineage. But yeah, mainly just practicing at this Chan temple, and I got into Mahayana Sutras there mainly through reading groups that we developed there, and eventually we started to meet outside of the temple as well in each other's houses. And the notes that came from those reading groups I now publish on Shingen's portal. for people if they're interested. So there's lots of sutra summaries and things like that, which were all, now summarizing a text is trivial because of AI, but these were all written before ChatGPT. So it's a very, it's a lot of work. You have to actually read it and figure out, well, what is this saying? Um, yeah, and then so what got me interested in Jodo Shinshu was, well, I also went to Nepal, and I'm very interested in Newar Buddhism, and you asked about Pustika Puja, which we can talk about in a bit. But I couldn't really practice that tradition for various reasons. But I always had a connection. Well, I eventually developed a connection to Amitabha Buddha, and I really started to feel this actually when I was practicing in the Karmakagyu tradition or Karmakaji. I practiced Poa, and Poa is a practice for the transference of consciousness at the time of death. And so it's essentially you're rehearsing the moment of death, rehearsing the moment of transferring your consciousness, and you want to make sure that your consciousness transfers to Sukhavati, to the Pure Land, and not to the lower realms. And so there are various practices that you do to close the opportunity for your consciousness to go to the lower realms and to ensure that it goes to Sukhavati. And I really felt in that, in doing those practices, I felt the presence of Amitabha Buddha, and realized, well, he has, although of course the Dharmakaya is transpersonal, it's something without a face and without form, but there are these manifestations of Amitabha Buddha which are personal, and I felt a personal connection to this. You could say Sambhogakaya Amitabha or Amitayas. And so I had this connection to Amitabha, and even when I continued practicing at the Linchi Chen temple, they always balanced Chan with Pure Land practice. And so they had a lot of Amitabha Sutra retreats and Nianfo practice or recitation of the Buddha's name. And I continued practicing that, but there were a lot of other practices mixed in. And I realized after a while, there are various things which led me to this decision, but I realized that I wanted to focus on Amitabha Buddha. And so I sought out a Pure Land temple. I didn't really know a lot about Jodo Shinshu at the time, but I eventually found the Toronto Honganji, which in the English name is Toronto Buddhist Church. They have three names: Toronto Buddhist Church, Toronto Buddhist Temple, and Toronto Honganji. You can see on the wall, on the website, and on the door. There are three different, and so that's where I started practicing after a while, and that's where I got my current Dharma name, Shakri Shingan, after I took refuge there. And yeah, since then, that's been about a decade as well, since I've been interested in Jodo Shinshu. But what really got me hooked on Jodo Shinshu was reading the letters of Renyo, Renyo Shonen, who I've already mentioned. And Renyo doesn't connect to a lot of people, but I could see that although on the surface his writings were a lot of people think, oh, it's very simple. He's just repeating the basics. I could see that below that surface level, there's something very deep there. And so, yeah, that's something I connected with.
Yeah, and have you thought about like being a little bit more in a official capacity, formal capacity, like ordaining or something like that, or like do any
Yeah,
kind of further training?
yeah, for sure. I just have to memorize a lot of things. But yeah, that's a work in progress.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Well, I
Well,
think
after I've memorized the Shoshinge in the uh, Shofu and Gyofu and various other things. But yeah, that's something that will take some time, but it's something that I aspire to. Yeah,
wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. And it sounds like a very, I mean, international and varied and in like very interesting journey that took you all over the place and had you exploring a lot of different uh, perspectives and a lot of different approaches for sure. And it's wonderful to hear that you kind of found through the letters of Renyo, but also just through your pursuit of Amitabha, that you found yourself in a place where you really feel connected to that worldview. And then actually it is interesting. Well, two quick things. One, I think it's wonderful that you're one of your first moments, your introductions to Buddhism came through film because I know that you at one point I believe you were a TA at the University of Toronto for religion and film class,
Yes.
and which I've that's a conversation for another time, but I really would love to know more about how that went. But also too, I mean, like there's just a reflective quality between you and I on this, where I remember being in like sixth grade or fifth grade or something like that, and the teacher put on Kundun, which is the Martin Scorsese Tibetan
Yeah.
the Dalai Lama story, and it was like it blew me away, and I was like, man,
Yeah.
what is this movie? But like it struck me for like different, like in a different way. So it's just
Yeah.
like there's something about sometimes those introductions, especially through movies when you're younger. It's just like there's something about that. But there wasn't much of a Jet Li element to it, but it was definitely a
Yeah.
striking film.
Well,
And good.
that era, the 90s for Buddhism, it was great. And we really need to get back to that. There were so many, and so that was also, Kundun, that was one I watched at that time, and also 7 Years in Tibet. And uh yeah, those kinds of those kinds of movies at that time, Little Buddha, it's yeah, those kinds of movies really are what sparked my interest. But yeah, Jet Li also is there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I should
exactly.
give him credit as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it'll be exciting. It'll be an exciting movie. It'll be a exciting Buddhist story for sure. And then, but also too, there's the film element, but then you have this relationship with text, which is very powerful, and with engagement with text. And this is something that I kind of alluded to before, but I just wanted to speak with you just a little bit about like what brought you into studying the living text quality or the living book quality and the book worship, and what you found from studying that within what seems like a variety of traditions. But what got you into that, and what's something that you feel like some people should know more about, because it's kind of a new topic for myself. Like I know basics about it.
Well, this is something that I'm writing a book about, but it was the topic of my dissertation. So the book will be called Pustaka Puja, the same title as my dissertation. But you can find the dissertation online. But the book will reword things in ways that will be more accessible to a general audience. And that should be hopefully will be published next year. I'm still working on on editing that. So what got me into that was reading the Mahayana Sutras with my at the time master's supervisor, Christoph Emmerich at the University of Toronto. And we were reading the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines in Sanskrit, the Ashtasahasrika Pragya Paramita. And one of the things that was very, very remarkable about it was, and this is something which people notice when they read, any version of this sutra, but also people notice it with a lot of Mahayana sutras. I would say about half of Mahayana sutras have this feature, some of them more prominently than others, and that's self-referential passages. So when you read, particularly from chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5 of the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines, you'll notice that it's talking about setting itself up for worship and then worshiping it in a puja, which is a worship, which is it means worship in Sanskrit. So setting it up for worship, worship in a worship in a ceremony with candles and banners and lights and incense and aromatic powder, and all sorts of things like that. Very, very, very visceral and very descriptive description. And so it seemed like this can't be just a fantasy. This has to be corresponding to something which actually happened. People have to actually have done this, and there has been a lot of back and forth in academia on this topic between three or four scholars, whether this actually happened or not. And I think people who deny that it actually happened are missing, if I dare say, they are missing some very important things about these passages. And I would argue that they definitely did happen. And we have evidence from later references to Mahayana Sutras, not really in the early period, but later references that these should be set up for worship. And also in Newar Buddhism today, which is the only continuing Sanskritic tradition of Mahāyāna Buddhism, which continues in the Kathmandu Valley in Nepal. And the books are set up for worship in much the same way as they are described in the sutra, put on a throne. It says, in the sutra, put it up on a throne, worship it with, all of these implements, and then, read it and explain it to others. And this is something which got me interested in, well, did this actually happen? So not just explicating these passages and trying to understand, well, what is their structure? Are they, insertions from some external ritual manual, or are they inherent to the text? Are they intrinsic to the text? And I would argue that they are intrinsic to the doctrine of the text, for various reasons. But the actual practice is really interesting. And that's done. I mean, Buddhists, I would say that the quintessential Mahayana practice is sutra worship. So in various, and even in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, when we recite Namo Amida Butsu, that's the encapsulation of the 18th vow, which is said to be the essence of the larger sutra, which is supposed to be the essence of all of the teachings of the Buddha's lifetime. So it's a telescoping, and these telescoping practices are used in all sorts of traditions. I think Dogen also says something like, you can embody the essence of all of the sutras in sitting in meditation, and the Lotus Sutra traditions, they recite the name of the sutra. Of course, also in Sotoshu, as you know, that there is the Dhyanya Tendoku, reciting the whole 600 Vasical sutra, but there's also a telescoping practice. There's an abbreviation practice where instead of reading every single word, you fan it in the air, right? And this is something which is very similar. So how is it practiced in Newar Buddhism? Well, they get a folio, or they get a manuscript, and so people have an idea of what these are shaped like. This is very small, and this is a kind of small version of what these look like. But essentially, the pages would not be connected. But this is the shape of manuscripts from South Asia, and this is a Heart Sutra, so it's very short. But the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines, it would be about this big. And so they'd open it up, and if you were to recite from cover to cover, it might take you several days individually. But if you split it between 10 priests evenly, and they all recite simultaneously, you can do it in an hour. So this is how it's actually practiced. It's an abbreviation practice. And I would argue that this is something which started quite a long time ago, but I'm still looking for breakthrough evidence of that. But there are references to this difference between Shindoku, in Chinese, Shindoku, or using the Japanese pronunciation, sorry, so it means true reading, and then Tendoku, turning reading or an abbreviated reading. And so true reading refers to reading from cover to cover, reading every character. And then Tendoku is some kind of abbreviated practice where you don't have to read from cover to cover. And so the efficacy of this there can be many kinds of effects of this. One of them is I shouldn't say just, but one of them is worldly benefit. So recovery from illness, fortune, freedom from injury when you go to battle. This is something the sutra says, right? All sorts of benefits, safety when you're traveling, and then on the other hand, the spiritual benefits, of course, is that ultimately, when you read the sutra and you explain the meaning of the sutra and you understand the meaning of the sutra, then you understand the perfection of wisdom, and the perfection of wisdom is the mother of all Buddhas. And because it's the mother of all Buddhas, it gives rise to all of the perfections, all of the paramitas. That's how you attain irreversibility on the path to Buddhahood. And so you can attain full Buddhahood through reading the sutras. And so all of these practices are interconnected. And so, I've done a lot of, I spent a lot of time in Nepal looking at these practices and how they differ from temple to temple and also text to text. So, for example, if they're reading Perfection of Wisdom, they'll just divide it, but they won't necessarily do any other. They'll do a major, tantric puja as well at the same time, but they won't do anything beside that. In some cases, if they're reciting the Pancharaksha Sutra, which is five protectresses. They are very powerful goddesses who also embodied in these sutras. When you recite it, it's like reciting their mantras, reciting their dharanis. Um, it has a ritual efficacy. Then the priests can also dress up in the colors of these five goddesses, and you can also make a mandala, and so things can get very elaborate. You can also do sutra recitations for the perfection of wisdom in 100,000 lines, where you need 108 priests to recite simultaneously, and so it's a cacophony. The sound. It's a cacophony, so similar to when a group of when a sangha is all reciting mantras together. You can't really make out precisely one syllable at a time, but it has a beauty in its in its in its in the chaos, the chaos of the sound. You can feel the Dharma. It's very visceral as well. Sound is something. This is something that I'm also very interested in. Is the ritual nature of sound, and sound as materiality, because sound is immediately visceral. It actually it's something that we feel vibrating within our heads. But it also has uh, meaning as well, direct meaning that we can understand. So, and I think this goes to the nature of orality and also the nature of writing. And this is something which was very important for the early Mahayana and why they set their books or their sutras to writing.
This is
But
a
those are all I'm just kind of touching on all sorts of things which I can only fully explain, in book form. But hopefully it whetted some people's appetites.
no, you just sold your book. Wow. I mean, it's an amazing,
Thank you.
amazing, amazing sounding book. Wow. And that might be coming out next year, hopefully. That's kind of the fingers crossed.
Yeah. It'll come out next year with Heidelberg University. They will publish it open access, so you'll be able to download it for free. And I'm a
Wow.
very big fan of open access, as you can tell. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really, I really don't like when, especially a lot of journals, they publish things. You might see like the name of an article from the 1980s, and nobody can find that anymore. And it just disappears. So if we make things open access and people can have their own copy without worrying about being sued for copyright infringement, I think I'd like to get behind that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for offering so much hard work in such a generous way. Again, I mean, it really is a very cool thing, and it helps people get excited. And you're right, like, if you're less worried about copyright things, or you're less worried about even just paywalls or whatever else it is, that it spreads. Like the more people can dive in when they have the interest to get going on it. No, that's really really cool. And just to speak to the the I guess I want to say the pomp and circumstance, but just like the brightness and the energy of one of these situations one of these worship events that you've just shared. I recently attended a major anniversary of the temple that I go to, and which is the Soto Zen temple, and it had different elements to it. It had Dharma combat to it. It had I think a Shuso ceremony as well. And part of that, though, part of it, along with the celebration of the temple having a major anniversary, they had different Zen priests come from all over, and they were doing that fanning. They were doing the fanning of the sutras, and it wasn't just that though. They were also like making a lot of noise. They were like
Yeah,
saying things, and it made
yeah.
for a very and there's a lot more yelling in Zen ceremony than you might
Mm,
find in romanticized versions of just like those like quiet temples and all that. Like
sure.
when people come together, it's serious, but it's like a party. It's like a very serious party. So
Yes.
just that's my observation. But the energy that comes from shouting and the randomness and the spontaneity of it is really cool, and powerful in that way. And then also too, just what you were mentioning about separating out the the text among, like splitting it up into 108 pieces for 108 people to recite, or divvying it up in other ways like that. There's something really interesting about this too, and I don't know if it's I'm just uh, offering this as a hypothesis, but like there is something kind of interesting about hearing a sutra at once in different parts because it gives almost like an equal authority to everything. Like it's
Hmm.
the important part's not in the beginning, it's not in the end. It doesn't crescendo at the end, or it's not the middle part is like the most like a prime adventure point. It's everything at once, and it kind of gives everything a full strength to every part of it because every part of it is important to the sutra. So I just wanted to offer that because like there's something about the it all hitting you at once that is that speaks to the power and the impact of every word in in the
Yeah,
text.
being hit by the Dharma bus. Yeah, just being overtaken by the Dharma. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And when yeah, it's just it's something that I recommend people experience, if they ever have a chance to go to the Kathmandu Valley, try to seek out one of these temples. Um, some of them do it every morning, and some of them do it only on certain anniversaries. But yeah, it's a great practice, and I think it's really one of the oldest practices that is continuing in Mahayana Buddhism, and it's something that Mahayana Buddhists have between them, although in common between them, although it's something which differs from tradition to tradition. But other things which in Newar Buddhism are common to other traditions is, and Gregory Sharkey, who's um, who's a Jesuit scholar based at based in Kathmandu at Rangjung Geshe Institute. He points out in his book Buddhist Daily Ritual or Buddhist Daily Puja. It's about the Nitya Puja or daily worship. Is that it's done the same in the Kathmandu Valley as in many things are the same sequence, the same practices as in Sri Lanka. And so the ter so there is this in Newar Buddhism, they wouldn't say it's the Theravada practice, but they would say it's a Shravakayana practice. So that they would say that they have all three vehicles. They practice Shravakayana in the main shrine with the Shakyamuni statue, and then at a different level, although still accessible to most people, they practice Mahayana practices, recitation of Tara's names or recitation of the Mahayana Sutras. And then they also have a second level where they have an Amitabha shrine and an Avalokiteshvara shrine, but still exoteric. But then the third level, they have the esoteric level where the general public cannot access, and that's the tantric shrine. And so they have the Vajrayana level, which is the main one for the priests who practice in Newar Buddhism. Um, so they have they practice three vehicles at the same time. So that's something that and that's the internal explanation within the tradition that they have the Triyana system. Um, that's not a scholarly imposition. So it's a really fascinating tradition.
It certainly is. Wow. No, I had no idea about that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. Um, that is so if I were to want to learn more about that, what would I type in just to like as far as like is there a temple name or something like that that I would know that would help be helpful?
You mean for tourists
For
or
just for
as
like
a just for the information?
yeah for that specific area.
I would just search yeah, I would search Newar Buddhism. So that's Newar, Newar, which is the old name for Nepal. So due to vowel and consonant shifts over time, the pronunciation changed from Nepala to Newara to Newa, and that's in the Newar language, Nepal Bhasha. Uh, and if you're going to Nepal, a place where you can see it every morning is at the gold. They have an English name, so the Golden Temple. If you search the Golden Temple in Lalitpur, which is in the Kathmandu Valley, so if you're staying in Kathmandu, you can easily get there in the morning. Well, I don't know, it depends on the traffic, but But yeah, the Golden Temple, the Sanskrit name is Hiranya Varna Mahavihara, which means golden. Hiranya means gold, and Varna means color, so golden. And Mahavihara, great monastery.
Wow.
Uh, and then the Newar name is Kwa Baha, and Kwa means hot water. And so there's a lot of explanations or lots of theories as to why it's called Kwa Baha. But one of them is that there's a hot spring underneath the temple. Um, so yeah, it has three names.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that because I definitely, at least at the very least, want to see some images around that. But it's wonderful to hear that you have. It sounds like you've had some experience with it, but also too like that it's just something that's out there for everyone to learn a little bit more about. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I just have two more questions for you. One about promotion, and then the other about just general advice. And my promotion question is if there's anything that you would like to get the word out about, something that you're working on. I know you have some upcoming books. I know you also have some books that were recently published or events. And then also if not, or in addition to, if you know about things that your friends or someone that you know is doing something cool that you want to share, please do so. And just to offer some things that I found, you have your personal website, which we discussed, which is alexanderjoneil.com. And then the other website, Shingans dot what was the
That's right. Shingan's Portal,
shingansportal.com.
shingansportal.com.
And
Yes.
then you also have the International Symposium on Buddhism and
Yeah.
Neoplatonism. And you have the second symposium coming up this year, July 27th through the 28th in Berlin, Germany. And so that's coming up. And then you also have a book that is out now, which is Buddhism and Neoplatonism, which is something that you co-edited. And then you have so yeah, and on your personal website, you have more of a list of the different articles and texts that you've worked on. But if there's anything else that you'd like to share, please feel free.
Sure. Well, I would just say that the website Alexander J. O'Neill is mostly, you know, mostly anything which is academically oriented. I put there. So for people who are, if you're listening to this and you're a fellow academic, and you're in Buddhist studies, I probably know you already. So this is probably not necessary for you to know. Uh, but yeah, if you find it interest, if you don't mind, if people are fine with reading academic articles, then they could have a look at that website. But yeah, Shingan's portal is something that I set up for essentially, projects like I mentioned, as I read through sutras and I want to, share my interpretation, which is how I describe translation, with a general public, sometimes with lots of editing and critical notes, critical apparatus, like you would as a scholar. And sometimes when I just want to present, to just publish something, just so that this, rare or rarely known sutra gets some kind of representation out there. Um, that's where I publish those. But I also have study guides, as I mentioned, for Mahayana sutras, and that's something that's a work in progress. Everything on there is a work in progress, but that's meant for people to essentially. My long-term goal is to have it be a place for people to get information about anything related to Buddhist sutras. So eventually, my goal is, I don't know if I'll ever achieve it before I die, but or before I'm reborn, I should say. But rather, I'd like to have it be a place where people can get, something from every kind of category of Buddhist scripture. And yeah, so that's one thing. But in terms of books, yeah, the ones books that are probably most accessible to a general audience would be, there are some books that are listed on that website, which are mostly sutra translations. Uh, the book on Buddhism and Neoplatonism is, yeah, if you're interested in Neoplatonism or Platonism and comparative philosophy, then by all means, yeah, please have a look at that. And this conference on Buddhism and Neoplatonism is one that we hope to be hopefully biennial, so every 2 years. And this is something where we have a look at the similarities between Buddhism and Neoplatonism, because there are lots. And this is also a great way to engage in a comparative philosophical discussion, but also comparative religions, because Neoplatonism is something which is very important in the development of the history of Christianity and also Islam. And we have had some interest as well from people looking at comparing Islamic approaches to Neoplatonism, to Buddhist approaches. And so I think that's also a great place for us to start or do that dialogue as well, because that's something that we don't really hear a lot about in Buddhism, the Buddhist Islamic interaction. And there's a very strong, very interesting interaction, which I can't get into now, but I think it's much closer than people think. And then in terms of things that I'd like to promote, yeah, I mean, essentially everything I do, I try to put on those websites. But in terms of books, recent books, one thing that I would perhaps like to mention is the Great Collection Sutra. And this is a sutra that I'm publishing through my imprint Dharmakaya Books. And this is a large sutra that's referred to by a lot of Mahayana teachers. It's essentially a collection of major sutras, but they all have very common characteristics between them. So very, very similar to the Avatamsaka Sutra, which has a lot of different constituent parts, some of which are independent sutras. And this one, we've just published the second volume, and that is 30 fascicles in Chinese, and the total number of pages in English is maybe 1,300 or 1,400. So it's taken many years. So it in total maybe 5 years now to get these 2 volumes out, and there are 2 more volumes to go. So it's going to be a long way. And that one, because we are still trying to figure out what to do with it when all 4 volumes are out, there's not an open access PDF. But if anyone's interested, just email me, and I'm very happy to email you a PDF of the current draft. That's no problem at all. Then otherwise, there's another book, if people are interested in Newar Buddhism, that I published together with Samuel Grimes from Fairfield University, which is a translation of a contemporary explanation of the Guru Mandala Puja as it's practiced in Newar Buddhism. And that's called, the title is very easy to remember. It's Guru, Mandala, Guru Mandala. So yeah, this is a translation of a book by Yagyamanpati Vajracharya, who is a prominent tantric priest in Nepal. And so people who are familiar with the Tibetan Guru Mandala, I think they'll find this to be very interesting to compare with the way that they do it in Tibetan Buddhism. So Guru Mandala, for those who don't know, is the most important puja that you have to do at the beginning of every ritual in tantric Buddhism. And yeah, otherwise I'll just post everything on on my websites. So also for the Zonkaku project, there is also a website for that. Zonkaku project, sorry, .com or .org. I have to double check. It should be .org because it's non-commercial, but I might have done .com. Depends which domain was cheaper. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for offering all of that. And yeah, I mean, my gosh, like I'm just like envisioning getting a new bookshelf just to just to, because like everything that you've been talking about, I mean, it's just like my gosh, all of these texts, they sound if you haven't had a hand in them directly, the ones that you've been referring just sound so interesting. So thank you for sharing so many resources to dive deeper. It really is awesome. And then for advice, I was wondering what kind of advice would you want to give to somebody who's walking the Buddhist path that you would have wanted to have heard earlier on in your journey?
Well, one question which I get a lot is, should I read this text first or that text first? For example, if someone's interested in Jodo Shinshu, should I read the collected works of Shinran first, or should I read Introduction to Buddhism? And definitely, I would say read an Introduction to Buddhism, but don't stop reading, and be careful about making a fixed list that's too long, that you'll lose motivation. So start small, but don't stop studying. But also, if you find studying is too hard for you, then just doing what you're drawn to. So if it's meditation, then just keep practicing meditation. If it's reciting Nembutsu or Daimoku, just continue with that. And I think kind of going back to the earlier theme of how the Buddha adapts his teaching to the conditions of each being, everyone will hear the Dharma. Ultimately, I believe everyone will hear the Dharma that's suited to their temperament. But sometimes when we try to force a paradigm, a different paradigm on ourselves that isn't meant for us, we end up missing that call of the Buddha that's drawing us to something that we should be paying attention to. So I think just I don't know if this sounds a little corny, but follow your instinct. If you find a certain kind of text interesting, then go with that, and then find something to stick with. So and I did shop around when I was first interested in Buddhism. I tried lots of different traditions, but it's good to find something that you really connect with and try to definitely have a teacher who you can discuss things with. And that in Buddhism, we call that the Kalyana Mitra, or good friend. And the Kalyana Mitra is essential in all traditions, including Jodo Shinshu. And that's someone who you can ask questions to when you have doubts. And yeah, books are very helpful as well. And books can be a Kalyana Mitra, but if it's a living person, it's best because then you can actually have a conversation with it. And one other piece of advice is don't substitute human conversation with talking to AI chatbots, because now there are lots of these, Buddha AI chatbots out there, and I would be very wary of that. Make sure that it's a human, because this is also something very important in Zen as well as the Ishin Denshin, the mind-to-mind transmission. So make sure that it's someone who has themselves an understanding. As far as you're able to discern as a newcomer to Buddhism, and if you feel any unease or any doubts, then maybe that teacher's not for you. You should really feel comfortable with that teacher. So those are a few words of advice I'd have. If you ask me tomorrow, I might have different advice, but that's just what comes to mind at the moment. Yeah.
Alexander, thank you so much for speaking with me today. This is such a treat, and it really is inspiring. I mean, like the way that you are inspired inspires me, and I hope that anyone listening also feels the same way. And like you're also just thank you for your generosity. I mean, not just with sharing your time with me today, but just with the work that you do, that you spend years on, and then you just upload it and have it available for others to have as a resource. It's just such a
Oh,
special
thanks.
thing that you do. So thank you. And then and thank you for sharing your advice. The AI component to Dharma conversations and Buddhist conversations, that's new to me, but I know that it's out there. And so thank you for
Yeah.
for bringing that up, because
Yeah.
these are the times. These are the times we're in, and
Yeah.
they are different. So thank you for that that word of caution as well. But thank you for your willingness to share your elements of your journey with me, and for doing what you do, because it is it's 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 a lot of I mean, you're just so busy. You're just so busy.
Oh,
You're doing so much. It's
yeah.
wonderful.
That's a problem. I'm sorry. I have to start turning things down. But if you ever want to talk again, I'm not going to turn that down. So please let me know if you'd like to do another round of this.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Alexander, thank you again, and we'll be in touch soon.